Once upon a time there was a gentleman who took the haughtiest and proudest woman in the world for his second wife. She had 2 daughters with the same temperament and the same exact appearance. On the other hand, the husband had a daughter whose gentleness and goodness was without parallel. She got this from her mother, who had been best person in the world. No sooner was the wedding over, the stepmother's ill humor revealed itself. She could not abide the young girl, whose good qualities made her own daughters appear all the more detestable. So she ordered her to do all the demeaning tasks in the house. It was she who cleaned the plates and the stairs, who scrubbed the rooms of the mistresses and her daughters. She slept on the wretched straw mattress at the top of the house in the garret, while her sisters occupied rooms with parquet floors and the most fashionable beds and mirrors in which they could regard themselves from head to toe. The poor girl endured everything with patience and did not dare complain to her father, who would have only scolded her since she was totally under the control of his wife. Whenever she finished her work, she used to sit down near the chimney corner along with the cinders. Consequently, she was commonly called Cindertail. The second daughter, however, was not as malicious as her elder sister, and she dubbed her Cinderella. Nevertheless, Cinderella looked 1,000 times more beautiful in her shabby clothes than her sisters, no matter how magnificent their clothes were. Now the king's son decided to hold a ball and to invite all the people of quality. Our 2 young ladies were included in the invitation, for they cut a grand figure in this country. Of course, they were very pleased, and began planning and choosing what would be the best gowns and the best headdresses to wear. This meant more misery for Cinderella, because she was the one who ironed her sisters' linen and set their ruffles. Nothing was talked about but the style in which they were to be dressed.
"I want my red velvet dress,"
said the elder sister.
"and my English point lace trimmings. I won't have my usual petticoat to wear,"
said the younger.
"but to make up for that, I'll put on my gold-flowered mantle and my necklace of diamonds, which are quite impressive."
They sent for a good hairdresser to make up their double-frilled caps and brought their patches from the best artisan. They summoned Cinderella and asked her opinion, for she had excellent taste. Cinderella gave them the best advice in the world and even offered to dress their hair for them, which they were glad to accept. While she went about it, they said to her,
"Cinderella, would you like to go to the ball?" "Alas, ladies, you're playing with me. That would not benefit me at all." "You're right. People would have a great laugh to see a Condorcet at ball."
Any other person but Cinderella would have messed up their hairdos, but she was good-natured and dressed them to perfection. They could eat nothing for nearly 2 days because they were so excited with joy. More than a dozen laces were broken in the making of their waists as small as possible, and they were constantly standing in front of the mirror. At last the happy day arrived. They set off, and Cinderella followed them with her eyes as long as she could. When they were out of sight, she began to cry. Her godmother, who came upon all in her tears, asked what was troubling her.
I should so like...
She sobbed so much that she could not finish the sentence.
"You like to go to the ball, is that it?" "Ah, yes,"
said Cinderella, sighing.
"Well, if you be a good girl, I shall enable you to go."
She led her into the chamber and said,
"Go into the garden and bring me a pumpkin."
Cinderella left immediately, gathered the finest pumpkin she could find, and brought it to the godmother, unable to guess how the pumpkin would enable her to go to the ball. Her godmother scooped it up and left nothing but the rind, and then struck it with her wand, and the pumpkin was immediately changed into a beautiful coach gilded all over. Next she went and looked into the mousetrap, where she found 6 mice, all alive. She told Cinderella to lift the door of the trap a little, and as each mouse ran out, she gave a tap with her wand, and the mouse was immediately changed into a fine horse, producing a fine-looking team of 6 handsome, dappled mouse-gray horses. Since she had some difficulty in choosing something for a coachman, Cinderella said,
"I'll go and see if there's a rat in the rat trap. We could make a coachman out of him." "You're right,"
said the godmother.
"Go and see."
Cinderella brought the rat trap, which contained 3 large rats. The fairy selected one among the three because its ample beard, and after she touched it, the rat was changed into a fat coachman who had the finest mustache that have ever been seen. Then she said,
Go into the garden where you'll find 6 lizards behind the watering pot. I want you to bring them to me.
Cinderella had no sooner brought them than her godmother transformed them into 6 footmen, who immediately climbed up behind the coach in their braided liveries and hung onto the tree as if they had done nothing else in their lives. Then the fairy said to Cinderella,
Well, now you have something to take you to the ball. Are you satisfied? Yes, but I'm to go in these dirty clothes?
Her godmother merely touched her with her wand, and her garments were instantly changed into garments of gold and silver with jewels. She then gave her a pair of glass slippers, the prettiest in the world. When she was thus attired, she got into the coach, but her godmother advised her above all not to stay past midnight, warning her that if she remained at the ball one moment too long, her coach would again become a pumpkin. Her horses, mice, and footmen, lizards, and her clothes would resume their old appearance. She promised her godmother she would not fail to leave the ball before midnight, and so she departed, overcome with joy. Upon being informed that the grand princess had arrived, whom nobody knew, the king's son went forth to greet her. He gave her his hand to help her out of the coach, and led her into the hall, where the company was assembled. All at once there was dead silence, and the guests stopped, and the fiddlers ceased to play, and engrossed with everybody marveling the beauty of the unknown lady. Nothing was heard but a low murmur. Oh, how lovely she is! The king himself, old as he was, could not take his eyes off her, and whispered to the queen that it was a long time since he had seen anyone more beautiful and pleasant. All the ladies were busy examining her headdresses and her clothes because they wanted to obtain some similar garments for the next day, provided they could find materials as beautiful and artisans sufficiently clever to make them. The king's son conducted her to the place of honor and then led her out to the dance. She danced with so much grace that everyone's adoration was increased. A very fine supper was served, but the prince could not eat anything because he was so engrossed in watching her. She went and sat beside her sisters and showed them 1,000 civilities. She shared oranges and citrons with them at the prince had given her, and her sisters were quite surprised because they did not recognize her at all. While they were conversing, Cinderella heard the clock strike 12:15. She immediately made a low curtsy to the company and departed as quickly as she could. As soon as she arrived home, she went to look for her godmother, and having after thanked her, she said she had wished very much to go to the ball again the next day because the king's son had invited her. While she was busy in telling her godmother all that had happened to the ball, the 2 sisters knocked at the door, and Cinderella went to open it.
How late you are,
She said to them, yawning, rubbing her eyes, and stretching as if she had just awoken. However, she had not had the slightest inclination to sleep since she had left them.
If you had been at the ball,
Said one of her sisters.
you would not have been bored. The most beautiful princess attended it, the most beautiful in the world. She paid us attention over 1,000 times, and she also gave us oranges and citrons.
Cinderella was beside herself with delight. She asked them the name of the princess, but they replied that nobody knew her and that the king's son was stumped and would give anything in the world to know who she was. Cinderella smiled and said,
She was very beautiful then? Heavens, how fortunate you are. Can I have a chance to see her? Alas, Joyety, would you lend me the yellow gown you wear every day?
Indeed, said Joyette.
I like that. Lend my gown to a dirty Cindertail like you. I have to be quite mad to do something like that.
Cinderella fully expected this refusal and was delighted by it, for she would have been greatly embarrassed if her sister had lent her the gown. The next day the 2 sisters went to the ball, and so did Cinderella, even more splendidly dressed than before. The king's son never left her side and kept saying sweet things to her. The young lady enjoyed herself so much that she forgot the godmother's advice and was oblivious when the clock began to strike 12, for she did not even think it was 11. She rose and fled as lightly as a fawn. The prince followed her but could not catch her. However, she dropped one of the glass slippers, which the prince carefully picked up. Cinderella reached home, out of breath, without coach or footman, and in shabby clothes. Nothing remained of her finery except one of her little slippers, the companion of the one that she had dropped. The guards at the palace gate were asked if they had seen a princess depart. They answered that they only seen a poorly dressed girl pass by, and she had more of appearance of a peasant than a lady. When the two sisters returned from the ball, Cinderella asked them if they had enjoyed themselves as much as the first time, and if the beautiful lady had been present. They said yes, but that she had fled as soon as the clock struck 12, and she had been in such a haste that she had dropped one of her glass slippers, the prettiest in the world. The king's son had picked it up and had done nothing but gaze upon it during the remainder of the evening. Undoubtedly, he was very much in love with the beautiful person who had worn the slipper. They spoke the truth, for a few days later the king's son issued a proclamation accompanied by the sound of trumpets that he would marry the lady whose foot exactly fit the slipper. They began by trying it on the princesses, and then on the duchesses, and so on throughout the entire court. However, it was all in vain. Soon it was taken to the two sisters, who did their utmost to force one of their feet into the slipper, but they could not manage to do so. Cinderella, who witnessed their efforts, recognized the slipper, and with a smile,
"Let me see if it will fit me."
the sisters began to laugh and ridicule her. The gentleman who had been entrusted to try the slipper looked attentively at Cinderella and found her to be very beautiful. So he had said that it was proper request that he had been ordered to try the slipper on everyone without exception. He asked Cinderella to sit down, and upon placing the slipper on her little foot, he saw it go easily and fit like wax. The astonishment of the two sisters was great, but it was even greater when Cinderella took the little slipper out of her pocket and put it on her other foot. At the very moment the godmother arrived, and then she gave a tap to the wand of Cinderella's clothes, which became even more magnificent than all the previous garments she had worn. The two sisters then recognized her as the beautiful person they had seen at the ball. They threw themselves at their feet, begging her pardon for the harsh treatment they made her endure. Cinderella then embraced them, saying that she forgave them with all of her heart and began them to love her well in the future. Dressed just as she was now conducted to the young prince. He found her more beautiful than ever, and a few days later he married her. Cinderella, who was as kind as she was beautiful, gave her sisters apartments in the palace, and had them married the very same day to two great noblemen of the court.